This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to The Late Show with me, your host, James Radburn. And this evening we're going to talk about artificial intelligence or AI in education. I've got my guests, John Jones and Faye Ellis, and we're going to explore what that looks like, its benefits, its strategies to implement, and those ethical considerations. Wonder what the future holds.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to The Late Show with me, your host, James Radburn. And this evening, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence or AI in education. AI is a term that often refers to technology that we can perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as understanding language, recognizing images, solving problems, and learning from data. AI has been making waves in fields and industries. But what about education? We've opened Pandora's box. We cannot now close it. So, how can AI help teachers and students in the classroom and beyond? And what can some of the best practices and examples of AI in education be around the world? What are some of the limitations, challenges that we need to be aware of? Stay tuned as we start to explore these in the next segments of the show. Now, with me tonight, I have two educators who started to integrate AI into their classroom and in their daily practice. John Jones, Director of Innovation at the 4RGS Worcester Schools, and Faye Ellis, who has worked in education for 15 years, leading digital education programmes and STEAM strategy at the British Museum and in London schools. Welcome both, and thank you for giving up your time on the Friday night.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Good evening, James. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Nice to have the sun out and the picnics out today, especially for the coronation, hasn't it? My son came back saying that he planted a tree today, which was he was the honoured one to do that, so I was quite excited.
Lovely.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, my daughter came home from nursery wearing a crown, which was very sweet.
So, Faye, then, can you introduce yourself and tell me about your journey through education to your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I've worked in education for 15 years, mostly in the independent school sector. So, I've led digital learning programs and supported teachers and students in using technology. I also spent a few years working in the museum education space, so running workshops for schools and families, and a couple of years living in New York where I ran makerspace workshops for kids. And now I'm a digital coach at Halcyon London International School, which is a small IB school, London's only not-for-profit IB school in central London. So, yeah. And also doing an MBA at the moment at UCL in educational leadership and focusing on tech and AI.
Well, that sounds really exciting, that MBA and leadership and AI. Probably some late night studying there, I bet.
Yes, I'm struggling with the work-life balance, so definitely, but it's fascinating and it's a really good course and fantastic, meeting fantastic people through it as well. So.
Excellent. And John, same question to you. Can you just tell me about your journey? Because I know yours is quite an interesting one, going international as well, I believe.
I did go international. It seems like a very long time ago now. I got into teaching when I was about 25, 26, after working in sports management in London, and became a primary school teacher, and then went to the international sector at the International School of Monaco, which is a very interesting 5 years, and then moved back to a school in Kent called King's Rochester, and about 4 years ago, I moved to Worcester, as you said, as the Director of Innovation at the 4RGS Worcester Schools. And I think the biggest change I've seen over the course of my time as a teacher is the digital world. And if you ask my friends, what was I like as a kid with technology? Pretty useless, if I'm being honest. But when the school I worked at initially got some iPads, got some laptops, I saw potential, and then the iPad came along whilst I was in Monaco. We got some of them, and then as we know now, it's a valuable tool for everybody, and I think education is a sector that has really got to embrace the wonderful world of technology.
And I think that's something that connects all three of us, isn't it? That idea of how technology can really transform education and what it can do as well. And hopefully we can explore that as we go through this evening. But one of the questions I kind of want to ask guests that I come on, everyone's got a purpose. Everyone's got like, what was their one thing that sparked them to work in education? So I'll ask that for you, John, first. What's that one thing, or what's your purpose, and what inspired you to really work in education?
I think going to school, I had like a mixed sort of experience really of education. There were some really good teachers and some not so good teachers, and it got me thinking from an early age really about the difference a good education and a good teacher and a good curriculum can have. I ended up doing some work experience in a local primary school when I was at sixth form. I just loved it, and I thought that's something I'd like to do one day. As I said before, though, I didn't get into teaching until I was about 25 because I basically didn't think I was fully responsible enough to be a teacher until that point. And I haven't regretted it ever since. It's been an amazing journey.
And same to you, Faye, then. What's inspired you to be in education?
Yeah, a kind of similar story, actually. So, I had a pretty uninspiring education, especially secondary stage. I didn't even consider teaching as a career, but then when I was doing my BA, which was in digital media, I was designing products for children and got to spend quite a lot of time with kids, and realised just how great they are to spend time with and how creative they can be and how creative they are with technology as well. So I decided that I was going to find a job that let me do that. And I've never really had a sort of a set career path or plan, but I've been lucky to be able to explore different roles in different sectors and spend lots of time with lots of amazing kids.
I think that's one thing I've been really reflecting on recently is there's not a single career path when it comes to education now. And I think there's a whole variety and how many lives it touches in different sectors and different areas as well. And I think that's a really interesting topic, especially with this world of technology and AI and what jobs for the future and what that looks like as well. It's an interesting time to be in, actually. And that kind of leads us nicely on to the first theme that I really want to explore tonight, which is quite simply, what is AI? I know everyone has like a preconceived idea what AI is, and if you even look at Hollywood, they've made films from it. They've made millions of pounds from it, from HAL 9000, Space Odyssey, to the Terminator, to even to a concept of like how Neo in the Matrix can plug himself into a computer program and learn kung fu almost instantly. And AI is transforming the industry. It was only in the early 2000s Amazon, Google used it to improve their search algorithms and e-commerce systems, and now industries using it in manufacturing. And there have been massive breakthroughs in image and speech recognition and even self-driving cars. But over the last year, even less than a year, it's really blown up and really transformed. But considering actually there are some of those uses of AI we use on a daily basis from Siri, Google, and Amazon. I'm not going to say the name because you know what happens when anyone says that on the radio or podcast goes off. So what are some of the incidental uses of AI that you use in your everyday life then, Faye?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's I think we're starting to see AI popping up in lots of different tools that we've been using for a long time. One of the ones that in general I find really useful is that we use Google Apps at work, and it's Google Spaces does these AI generated chat summaries now. So, if you've missed a lot of conversation, it will give you a short summary of what's been happening. But we had quite a funny incident recently when a colleague sent an urgent message to all staff saying that somebody had left this very dangerous hot light on the drama studio floor, and it's a massive fire hazard. And Google's summary was, this person tells staff to make sure that they definitely leave the light on the floor at all times. So it's really interesting how a lot of these tools have been put out there, but they're still not perfect. And I'm seeing loads of really interesting examples of how they're being used in ways that perhaps the tech companies didn't predict.
Yeah, and John, what's your take on it at the moment with how you use it incidental and what are some of the things that may have surprised you about AI so far?
Interesting question. I think what surprised me is the amount of things that I use that have AI in them that I didn't realise had AI in them. So you use your phone, you use your smart speakers, etc. And a lot of these things have elements of artificial intelligence in them. And it's only when you start researching books, etc., and you realise it's already everywhere. It's in your bank account. It's in social media. It's in cars. It's in trains. And therefore, that gap in education is an obvious one that needs to be sort of utilised. I think we'll discuss more about that later on. But the amount of people that sort of were saying about AI years ago, I mean, I read a book by Anthony Seldon that sort of predicted this exact scenario. But what surprised, it's probably surprised Anthony as much as it surprised me, is the fact it happened so quickly and the speed of which it's suddenly become used, and the speed of which people think it's going to become it's going to get to that point where actually it is more intelligent in certain aspects than us. And that point, I think, was predicted to be in about 2050, but all of a sudden, people are saying it's in the next 2 or 3 years, which it's something to think about, isn't it? It's something that we all need to get our heads around. But I'm just amazed that it's all of a sudden those films you spoke about are kind of happening.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I started my MBA about a year and a half ago, I wasn't that interested in AI. A lot of the products that were out there were these, sort of adaptive learning products. And the amount of change that's happened in just a year and a half is complete. I've become, obsessed with it. It's something I read about all the time. I get so excited when a new tool comes out. So it's just incredible the rate that this is changing and growing.
Totally, and I think that's an interesting point in itself. It's almost impossible to keep up with it all. Every time you think you've mastered something, someone else pops up on social media. Some expert comes along with some new thing, and that's people who like us, who probably consider themselves relatively adept at it, are already struggling to keep abreast of it all. So for the everyday user, or even just for people that don't use it at all, it's quite mind-boggling. It's probably quite quite scary to think about, and I think that's an important issue that we need to work out a way of making it possible for everyone to utilize AI. Otherwise, it could cause a bit of a division. But I guess we'll talk about that in a bit, James. We've already gone off tangent.
No, that's what happens when we actually start talking, John. You know this was always going to be the case, and I think I was starting last night. I put in just some news articles like what's happened in AI over the last week, and it was absolutely phenomenal, and it is almost impossible to keep on top of with what is happening. And for those who are listening who've heard of AI, haven't really seen what's happened, but over the last year, it's really called generative AI at the moment, where it generates an output. And last summer, OpenAI company kind of came up with like a chatbot style way of talking to a computer system. And you may have seen these chatbots on Facebook Messenger or when you go online. I was trying to use one with a company today, trying to talk to them. It was awful, and hopefully actually AI can help it in the future slightly better than it is at the moment. But it's that idea that it's using their natural processing language. It's trying to communicate like a human. And so OpenAI put 300 billion words of information into what is Chat 3.5, and they plugged it into websites, even into Twitter, until Elon pulled the plug of that, and books. And what it did was learn how humans communicated and interacted. Now, with that massive knowledge base, it can use it. It can speed up a lot of things. And you're talking about that exponential growth. It took 1 day to get to 1 million users, and under 2 months to get to 100 million users. Now, if you think the internet, that took about 30 years to get to 100 million users. TikTok, it took 7 months. Whereas you're looking at less than 2 months for this Chat GPT system to really go into that level of use. And I've seen some fascinating but scary things. I don't know if you've seen the image of the Pope in his bomber jacket, or the fake Trump being tackled by the NYPD as well. And it's really, really exciting, but really scary at the same time. Is there anything else you two have seen that have like shocked you with its ability?
I think one of the things that we've been trying in school this week is Wonder Studio, which is for creating 3D animations. And so you record a video of yourself or of a person moving around, and then you can then turn yourself into a 3D character. So it's making the process of creating a 3D animation almost instant, which is incredible. The quality of the output is so good. And that's something that's got me really excited about the potential in education, actually, if students are able to create things that are, professional standard in one lesson. That's really exciting to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's those barriers. At the moment, you use sort of certain technical level to be able to do that sort of thing. I think AI might be able to sort of break down those barriers a little bit. The only thing I've noticed in that sense is already you have to pay for certain things, and that again causes a little bit of division. Even with things like Mid-Journey, which I got vaguely obsessed with for a little bit because I couldn't believe you could kind of like make your things in your head just appear on a screen. Instantly, and then I noticed how people were using different like cameras and putting in like different filters of cameras and getting to generate those sort of photorealistic images that you spoke about. But you can't get on it now. I tried to demonstrate it to my digital geniuses today, and already because it's obviously there's a free version and a paid version, and with the free version, there's just too many people using it. So I guess there's no limit to what you can do with these things. I mean, Faye, I saw something you did online, which was a few weeks back now. You sort of multitask on various different AI applications to put together a music video, and everything in it was generated by AI, from the music to the video to the script, and that's just astonishing, isn't it? And this is we're in the infancy at the moment. And no disrespect, but we're probably relative novices as well compared to some of these people out there that are doing this. But it shows you what you can do and what's around the corner, and it's exciting.
Yeah,
Faye, tell me more about that.
The video is amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell me about that music video. Yeah, tell me about that music video and how you used it in class. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was great fun. So one of the lessons that I do in my school is called Exploration. So it's a sort of extracurricular lesson that happens during the day. And this one, we were exploring different AI tools. So students created a piece of music using AI. They made a character. They brought that character to life. They wrote the lyrics to the song, and then they put it together to make a video. And it was all done using AI. And it was, I mean, the sort of the final output is quite surreal. It is slightly unnerving, but like John said, it just makes you think, if you look at where things like Midjourney were a year ago, what are these video tools going to look like in a year's time?
Yeah, and even with, you talk about Midjourney and even ChatGPT 4 that's coming out now at the moment, some of those art images have actually won awards already, and they've put it with human versions of it, and they've won awards. And it's where does the line of creativity go, and where does that work, and where is that human element? I know we'll explore that bit later, but let's bring it back really into the classroom. So Faye, you've said about music videos and how you've done that. John, what have you done so far about AI in the classroom, and whether it's with students or even for yourself in lesson planning or personalised art learning? What have you done so far?
Well, far less exciting than Faye, I'm afraid to say, but we've managed to get pupils to do things like revision plans into tables. They've got their exams around the corner, GCSEs, A-levels, internal examinations, etc. And what we had a conversation with some pupils, and it turned out they were making revision plans, but it was quite time consuming. Useful, but you really want to be spending your time revising, not making up revision plans. So we developed some prompts and shared them with sixth form, and they were able to come up with these amazing revision plans that focused on areas of weakness, etc. We're doing weekly sessions with staff at the moment and looking at how it can help with anything from assemblies to making Socrative quizzes, the questions for Socrative quizzes that you can then pop in, and teachers who are not wouldn't say that they're not tech savvy, but they're not, they use technology to a reasonable extent. All of a sudden, they're realizing that when utilized possibly, it can save them hours. And we're even looking at tools like the real fast reports, which don't write your reports for you, which is really important to get across, especially with perception of what teachers do. But they help make the reports better. They help with things like getting abbreviations correct and making sure that we use examinations as opposed to using the word exams. Anthony doesn't become Tony. Use the same thing throughout, and it just means that those sort of what are, if we're being honest, quite laborious tasks just become easier and become better and free up sort of time for teachers to actually be more creative, which is ultimately what they get squeezed on when these machine-like tasks, those robotic tasks that we have to do, are in front of us. And therefore, I think that's the way we've got to look at AI. From a teaching perspective and from a sort of pupil perspective, it's brilliant for creativity, but it's also brilliant for productivity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen so many benefits for our neurodivergent students as well. So things like Chat PDF, which uses OpenAI to summarize and interact with academic papers, which, a lot of people, I mean, it can be really challenging to read a long academic paper and pull out the key points from it. But those tools allow students to do that really quickly. And they're seeing huge benefits from those tools.
So I think that's the Chat PDF's been really revolutionary for our admin team as well, for looking at things like policies and pulling out data from even like JCQ about how to use AI and within assessment. You can just get it to summarize documents in seconds. Again, so it's not just the teachers and the pupils; it's actually the support staff that benefit from it as well. It's a real, and I hate the word, but it's a real game changer, but in so many different ways, and it's something that the problem is that one of the big issues we've discussed already is that as soon as you come up with a new idea, like for example the Socrative quizzes, it won't be long before Socrative probably have a button in it that you just press a button and it does it. It uses ChatGPT itself to generate those questions. So part of me thinking, actually, are we kind of wasting our time a little bit trying to harness these things together? And actually, things like ISAMs, well, that will probably have like a button, like a module you can just press a button on in about 3 years' time, which will basically generate the report yourself. But I think it's still good to make sure that we get our heads around these things as they develop, because then we can help to train and teach pupils and teachers about what we've learned on our sort of respective AI journeys.
I think that productivity is a really cool element. The amount of time we say about workload of teachers and spending time on tasks that are really not making an impact on the children. And I know with Microsoft, they're putting in bits and pieces in Excel and other platforms where they actually analyze that data for you so you can do the action behind it. But I want to go back to a phrase you said earlier about making these quizzes and lesson planning and bits like this. Often with the, especially mastery maths, and we're looking at curriculum, we talk about depth, not breadth. We're often guilty of looking at lots of different things in education, or very much surface level, and not actually going into that progression that we've really carefully planned in our curriculum. And do you think in some ways that with the summarization or with the quizzes, that there is a danger of not focusing on what almost the teacher has conducted and gone through that? And if there is, what are the ways we can actually protect against that? What are your thoughts, John?
I think what we notice. I think one thing we need to sort of establish, I suppose, is that it's the way it works, the way ChatGPT actually works, which will help to answer that question. It doesn't. This is from reading and listening to other people. In a nutshell, it's basically a prediction tool. It predicts stuff, and it predicts it well enough for it to be useful. It's not drawing information from a database as such. It's predicting every single letter based on the vast amount of information that's been fed into it. So when you explain that to teachers and when you explain that to pupils, it makes them realise that you can't trust it. And when you realise you can't trust it, it means that you can use it as a tool, but you've got to cross-reference. And when you're doing that cross-referencing, it automatically means it's helping you with your learning, because you're doing those things at quite a high level. Looking at let's talk about the quizzes. If you've generated some questions on the Weimar Republic, you need to make sure that teachers check those against the facts, and 9 times out of 10 they'll be right, but it does make mistakes. And therefore the same thing applies to pupils helping with essays or any sort of research that they're doing. You can't rely on it, much like you can't rely on everything you find on the internet. So these are the things we need to be teaching children. If they're going to use it, they've got to use it well. They've got to use it effectively. They've got to be able to judge its responses and compare and contrast them. And these skills are vital because this is what you teach children anyway, with the vast amount of information they can look on and find on the internet as it stands. So I think if you approach it from that perspective, that it's actually just another tool to help with the acquisition of knowledge, then it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, there's been a lot of press about ChatGPT and focusing on its ability to write things and all this focus on plagiarism. But actually, that's not even a good use of it. And I think students very quickly realize that, that first of all, that, we'll be able to tell a lot of the time that it's been written by ChatGPT, that it's not always correct, as you say, John, and that there are actually far more useful ways of using it. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
And that's almost the crux of what I wanted to get out of this show tonight. And it's, you kind of went back and perfectly explained it. Is we need to look at its depth as teachers. Actually, what is its role? What is the role of technology? What can it do to transform? And I know, was it Italy originally banned it?
Yep.
In their country. I know there are universities that were banning it, but also then there were universities embracing it within terms of the exams and all of that. What are your thoughts with how almost the exam system may have to evolve and adapt and develop with this new use of technology, Faye?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, my university is one that does allow use of it, but on the understanding that students are meant to reference the fact that they've used it. So, and I think that's key. It's making students so be open about and transparent about how they've used it and what they've used it for. But I think this sort of over focus on knowledge and on exams makes it much more appealing to students to use, because if they are being judged on how much knowledge they can retain and how, if they can regurgitate it in a fairly generic way, then those tools are going to be perhaps misused for those purposes. I mean, I would love to see assessments that bring in other skills, that bring in oracy, that bring in collaboration. I think we're probably quite far away from that at the moment, but I mean, a lot of that happens within the IB curriculum. I think students are graded on a sort of a lot wider criteria, I think, than in the national curriculum.
John, I actually favour that. I kind of completely agree. And I often use the term technology can make that learning visible, and it raises the question, are exams the best way to test what someone's ability is or knowledge is about something? And I think that's a real danger. We need to look at what does learning look like and how can we see that? And I think with analysing that data and how we can use AI to do that, it opens up new opportunities to personalise that learning and almost personalise what those assessments are, so we can act on those assessments in some ways. I think that'd be a really interesting, almost another topic to look at, another point, doesn't it? I think.
Absolutely, it's an age-old question about exams, and I think no one really thinks that exams are perfect in any way, shape, or form. But no one's come up with an obvious better way of doing things yet. But AI opens up a whole new world, I think. And you look at the software like Sensory Tech, which isn't perfect, but it's pretty good. And if you think about if you could somehow use AI to help monitor children's learning from an early age and pick up what they're really good at, pick what they're proficient at. And when I say learning, I don't just mean knowledge. I mean, as Faye said, with things like your ability to collaborate and present and speak and empathise. And if AI could pick up that without any bias, I mean, exams are biased to an extent to children that are good at exams. So AI could get rid of that, and you'd end up almost when children finish their educational journey with a complete fact file about development and proficiency and what children have worked hard at to get better at, and alleviate this time of year. And as I said earlier, it's that time of year today, and we've seen children that are upset today. We've had every school has the same thing with exams. And is there a better system out there? And perhaps AI can help develop that. But at the same time, we have to be careful, I think, with ethics and with data and with all sorts of other things that we probably don't really know yet, because we don't really know what's coming next. So it's exciting, but also at the same time, we have to be measured in our sort of response and development to AI, and particularly with things like assessment.
Yeah, there's a quote that I wrote down from an article this week from Dr. Hinton. He said in the shorter term, he thought that AI would deliver many more benefits than risks. So I don't think we should stop developing this stuff. But there is going to come a point where we've really got to have those conversations now about how we can implement this and what conversation we need to do. So before I play the news and have a look at this, let's go around this topic. What's the potential challenges that educators might face when implementing AI in the classroom? And how can some of those be overcome? John first.
I suppose technical know-how, even things like prompt engineering. If you can get your prompt right, your AI experience will be far better than if you can't. So much like with any CPD, it's important that if we want teachers to get the best out of the software, we need to make sure we teach teachers how to use it. Likewise for pupils, and making sure that what they're using it for does actually help them with learning. I think another big challenge is the ethical challenge. That again, we don't really fully appreciate yet. I mean, I'm partly responsible for things like GDPR at school, and I don't really know whether half of these tools out there are GDPR compliant or not. I know ChatGPT is. So if you're going to be using it for things like report writing, or you're putting in personal information, you need to make sure that what you're doing is safe and doesn't get the school into trouble, and certainly doesn't get pupils or staff into trouble as well. Keeping up with things is a massive challenge, as we mentioned earlier. Investing loads of time into something like ChatGPT is hopefully going to be beneficial, but we just don't know. It could be defunct in a year's time with something that's even better. I mean, we all know Apple. Apple have been very quiet. Have they got something up their sleeve that's going to make everything obsolete? We don't know. Is ISAM's going to introduce something into their package that means that the whole work on real fast reports is obsolete? So I think that's a massive challenge, and it's you're asking people to predict the future, which they simply can't do. So making sure that we stay on top of things is difficult.
Yeah, I think absolutely all the sort of concerns around age restrictions and privacy are really key, and that's why I'm pleased to see tools being built into things that we already use. So tools like Canva,
Yes.
Adobe have brought out an image generator now as well. So hopefully that will happen more, and we as educators, we can trust those tools and know that children are going to be safe when they're using them. I think also, especially at secondary level, having a sort of consistent school-wide approach about how AI can be used and should be used. So, I think there's this huge scale from, at one end, a piece of work that a student does that's 100% their own thoughts. They've done they've not even Googled anything. It's completely their thoughts, all the way to the other end where something's 100% plagiarized. In the middle, there are all kinds of levels of digital assistance. People use things like Grammarly. They might use ChatGPT to assist them, but then write it themselves. And I think schools need to have a consistent approach, and that can only really come with really good staff training. And access to technology as well is obviously key. A lot of schools, don't have access to devices all the time. A lot of schools will ban mobile phones as well, so that they're not an option for students. So I think access is a really key one, and it does worsen that digital divide. The students and schools, who've got more money, are going to have much better access to it and a much better understanding of it than others.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a little bit worried really about we talk about supercharging, and I think someone I heard on the radio the other day was talking about it's not going to eradicate lawyers, it's not going to eradicate teachers, it's going to eradicate lawyers and teachers that don't use the AI. Now, if that's down to the fact there's a monetary issue with accessing the technology or the software, that's not fair, is it? We can't have a sort of an almost a class division between those who can afford the tech and the AI and those that can't, because it will mean even bigger gaps in society. And that's something I'd like to have faith in that government are addressing. But I'm not going to go too much into the government for obvious reasons, but I'm pretty sure they aren't putting that as a priority.
But I think even wider afield, imagine countries who don't have internet access. The gaps are always going to grow, and even more so with that. And there's a real concern about what do we do as a society, not only in our country, but across the world, accessing tools like this. Are we giving, there was an article today or something about they're exploring whether it's given companies an unfair advantage because they're using this technology. And if you look at companies like Facebook and others, they're actually getting rid of jobs because they're being more efficient with their time. Now, I always go back to there's always this World Economic Forum about what the jobs do in the future. But it's not necessarily the jobs of labouring or in manufacturing. What those jobs turn into are those ideas of critical thinking. What are those jobs to solve the problems that machines are doing for us in some ways? And how do you solve those problems? And how do you have that communication? And I know, Faye, earlier you said about ORSI, and I know within our trust we're really looking at ORSI 21 project that we have in Worcestershire, and those are core skills that we really need to incorporate. Now, one word that has kept coming up a few times is this idea of training and telling staff what to do. So what have you done so far in terms of training, and also what are some of the things you want to do training, particularly with staff? Because I think at the moment, especially I'm from a primary perspective, so we're going to mainly be talking about this with staff. I know both of you work as secretary as well, so but what kind of things would you want to explore in terms of training for staff to make sure the implementation of this is as effective as possible? I'll start with you, Faye.
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the sort of projects I'm hoping to work on next year is developing sort of AI literacy throughout the school. And there have been some resources released this week by the Raspberry Pi Foundation and DeepMind, which the idea is that they don't just teach students to use the AI tools, they also teach them about how they work. And I think this is something that, even schools who don't have good access to tech should be doing, is making sure that students are aware of the impact that AI is going to have across all different fields. So at my school, we do a similar thing with sustainability. We call it green seasoning. And the idea is that sustainability, it's not standalone lessons, it's sort of sprinkled throughout the curriculum. And I'd like to see a similar thing with AI literacy. So, for example, in science, if students are exploring different cancer treatments, perhaps as part of that, they look at how AI is helping with diagnosing cancer in people. So I feel like it should be something that's always discussed and always there, so that students, even if they don't use them, they're still aware of the impact that it might have in the future.
Yeah, we've looked at all sorts of aspects with training. It's funny, I was thinking actually we did an inset in September when we all came back after summer, and I did like a digital learning update. I don't think I mentioned AI in it at any point, but, and then I did the same thing in January after Christmas, and it was all about AI. And similarly, after Easter, another AI update specifically because the landscape changed so much. So we've made all our teachers fully aware of what's happening to the best of our the biggest extent that we can. And each week I'm doing a sort of 20-minute session on something to do with it. So this week we did prompt engineering, as I mentioned before, and I think on the back of that, it turned out that what we need to do is actually establish a shared drive for all staff with AI, where we can drop in different prompts. So you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel, but actually all teachers can access this shared drive, and they can see, I want a prompt for report writing, I want a prompt for quiz generation, I need a prompt for writing an effective email. Similarly for pupils, we can do something as well. So it's that sort of democratization of AI. It's and the software that's out there, making sure that it's not some of us who are able to use these things, but actually everyone can. So it's just making sure that every part of the school community is updated with it. We even sent something out to parents about it, because when ChatGPT initially was opened up to the world, we quickly thought that parents might hear about this and wonder what the school is doing. So we sent an email explaining what it is, and we will. I think one of our plans is to, when we have a parental engagement evening, we'll demonstrate it to them as well, and show parents how we're utilising it. We even showed it to governors in a governors meeting as well, and it's just blown everyone's mind. It really, every time you demonstrate it to people that haven't seen it before, it blows their mind. And as Faye said earlier, it's just astonishing. And I think we all just need to make sure that everyone gets a chance to get the best out of it.
Yeah, I think that parental education piece is really important. We've had a lot of parents asking us for more information about it, because as you were saying before, there's just so much information to digest, and to know everything about it, you need to be online on Twitter all the time, reading news articles all the time. So I think parental education is also a really key part of the development of this, and making sure, because a lot of the work students are going to be doing it will be at home with parents around.
Chris has just put a comment in the chat here, and he said one of the crucial points for him is regarding the training of teachers to use AI in their own teaching, is that teachers can gain an understanding of how AI can fit into their existing teaching they do, so that the level does not exceed the teacher's competencies. So following up from that, kind of what are some of those quick things that teachers then can use within their everyday teaching, that they can start using these tools safely and securely, but see the transformational effect it can have?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of success with those quick win tools. So I'll share some links actually later on my Twitter, but for example, tools where you can record a sort of slightly rambling voice note, and then it will summarize it for you in a couple of paragraphs. Or in English, if students are reading a book, they can use an image generator to visualize the setting for that book. So things that are very simple to use, they don't require a login, but actually have a really big impact in a lesson. And I think the great thing is that I think most of these tools are very straightforward to use. I think some of them, like Midjourney, you do need to be a bit more skilled, but most of them are very, very simple.
Excellent. I think that is a nice segue into the news. So I'll play the news and we'll come back after it, and we're going to be really exploring and unpacking those ethical considerations of how we can use AI into the classroom and what we really hold for the future of AI as well. If the audio works, I've also got a little voice note from Chris, who is going to share his international ideas and expertise around AI. Wow. So sit back and hopefully, I know we've had problems with audio, but hopefully this will work.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
ASCL is due to ballot members for the first time in its history. The 4 education unions will ballot over strike action this term, and, if backed by members, would see action stretching into next year and could lead to full school closures. The government continues to hold its position that the most recent pay offer is fair and reasonable, and that next year school funding will be at its highest level in history. Schools Week covers the further implications of school funding issues in a story about the cuts some head teachers are making. In a survey conducted by the National Foundation for Education Research for the Sutton Trust, it was found that schools are cutting back on school trips, teaching assistants and IT equipment to help balance stretched budgets. Responses from 1,428 primary and secondary teachers show 50% of senior leaders said their school had cut back on trips and outings this year. Schools in the most disadvantaged areas were most likely to be impacted by cuts to trips. The research suggests that in secondary schools, leaders are also cutting back on subject choices at both GCSE and A-level. The Department for Education has estimated schools overall could afford £2.4 billion in new spending between 2022 and 2024 before facing net pressure on their budgets. But the Confederation of School Trusts warned its members could face a prolonged period of financial challenge due to pay rises and other increasing costs if more funding was not forthcoming. The Sutton Trust's poll also showed that some school leaders are using pupil premium funding to plug budget gaps. The report also underlines the issue of recruitment into the sector, with the NFER predicting that the DFE will again miss its recruitment into initial teacher training target this year. Meanwhile, the TES focused on a DFE funding rule change to help schools hit by falling pupil numbers due to a decline in birth rate. Schools that are not rated good or outstanding will be eligible for additional funding. Other changes will be introduced from 2024 to 25, and councils will set expectations around the minimum funding they must provide to support schools with significant increases in pupil numbers. Schools with more than one site will also receive extra funding where they need to duplicate services over multiple sites. Falling birth rates mean there are projected to be 500,000 fewer pupils in English state nurseries and primaries in 2028 compared with 2022. Nurseryworld.co.uk reports on the findings of its recent survey into staff wellbeing around Ofsted inspections. In the article on its website, it reports that over 3,000 owners, managers and staff responded to questions around mental health and well-being and the impact of inspections. Many responded that they felt increased stress and anxiety in the run-up to an inspection, with many having sleepless nights and some suffering from panic attacks and depression. The possibility of losing funding, should a setting be judged inadequate, was also mentioned. Full details of the survey can be found on the Nursery World website. The Guardian reports that a record figure of £4.8 billion interest has been added to student debt in Britain last year. The government has more than doubled the amount of money it makes from charging interest on student loans, as graduates face borrowing costs of almost twice the rate set by the Bank of England. The Office for National Statistics said the accrued interest had doubled from £2.3 billion in the previous year. The forecast average debt among the cohort of students who started their course in 2021 and 22 is £45,800 when they complete their course. Finally, the Morning Star in Scotland reports that increased spending per school pupil is failing to deliver improved outcomes. Spending per pupil has risen to £8,500 in Scotland, compared with around £7,200 across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. But attainment in Scotland is not on a similarly rising trajectory. Research by the Institute for Fiscal Studies shows that despite having the highest spending per pupil across the UK for a long period, test scores in reading, maths and science have either stayed the same or have been going down. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm going to attempt to explain in simple terms how the internet works. Let's take this tech briefing for example. I know every single one of you at some point have thought, how on earth can someone who makes a recording in one part of the world be broadcast globally to thousands of people and there be very few errors? I won't even go off when you go under a bridge, although I did give Tom Rogers a lift once and can tell you he's so radio he stopped talking when I drove through the Mersey Tunnel. For the internet to work, a way of allowing people to simultaneously use the same cables had to be created. The traditional phone call method could not be used because this would limit the number of users. If computers made a dedicated connection like a phone call does, then there'd be a lot of waiting going on. Imagine if you had to wait in line for a download. You are 457th in the queue. Your download is important to us. Please listen to this monotonous music while you wait. It simply wouldn't catch on. So, what happens? Data is transmitted in a similar way to the postal system, just a lot quicker. Right now, this podcast is arriving on your device in a series of packets. Packets are really small chunks of data that can be sent from device to device via routers. Without getting too geeky on you, the host server gets a request from you when you press play. The request says, start sending me the packets of the audio chocolate you know as Steve Woods' tech briefing. And like chocolate, it's split into chunks. These chunks are given an address to get to, an address of where they came from, some other information like the type of file being sent, so your device knows which application to open it in, and a number, so the packets can be ordered and rebuilt when they arrive. These packets are directed over the internet by routers that use the address information to direct them, and then rebuilt by your device once they arrive. Because packets are so small and can be forwarded rapidly, lots of computers can send data at the same time and keep everybody connected. So next time you're using the internet, consider that what you are looking at has probably been split into thousands of packets, routed across the world, and being rebuilt in a matter of milliseconds for you to enjoy. As always, if you have a tech question, why not send it to @TTRadioOfficial. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome back to the Late Show with James Radburn. Tonight I'm with John and Faye. We're going to explore how AI looks in education. And this next section of the show, I really want to look at those ethical considerations. I know we've kind of talked about it so far, but Faye, what do you think are some of those potential ethical concerns around AI in the classroom?
So I think, firstly, a lot of these tools are very new. A lot of them are not built for education. So, with the educational tools that we sort of have that comfort of knowing that they are specifically built for children to use, whereas things like ChatGPT are not. We still don't know exactly what they're going to produce each time we use them. They do have some pretty robust guardrails on them in terms of the kind of content they can produce, but still it's experimental. And then I think there's a lot of ethical concerns around the image generators. I think not just in terms of the images that they're sourcing from and copyright issues, but also the kinds of images that they produce. So recently I got students they created AI fashion collections, and all the models that were created by Midjourney were sort of skinny white women. So that was a good opportunity to have that discussion about why those images are coming up so much and how the AI works. But I think it's really important that if students are using the tools, that they also understand how they work, where they're getting the information from, and how they're coming to create the text or the images or the video that they do.
That's a really good point. I've never really thought about that before. I guess it must work similarly to the ChatGPT, that it must have a repository of images that it then draws upon to create the other images. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I think there's so many question marks with ethics, even from using it to generate, support with report writing. Is that ethically correct? I personally think it is, but people will have different opinions on that. Mm-hmm. Right up to the ethics of how can, governments or forces that might use it for malign and negative reasons. I mean, you again, right at the start of this whole conversation, you spoke about films like Terminator and stuff like that. We all thought they were sort of fantastical, but the reason this guy left Google is because he was concerned about where this is going, and lots of people are raising concerns. Now, personally, I don't. I think there's more good than bad. I think I read again a book which made a really interesting comparison. I think it wasn't a book; it was an article in the Economist or something, and it was a philosopher, and he was talking about Hiroshima, and he said that when the obviously in World War II with the atomic bombs, atomic power was used in a horrifically negative way. But now it's used in generally a very positive way for power and power that is renewable. So I'm hoping that there's a way we can ensure that the future of AI is used productively and ethically, positively, because there's no doubt that there's potential negative consequences of it being misused. But I just you've got to have faith that the people very quickly realised that there needs to be some form of legislation in place that enables people to get the best out of the technology, but at the same time stops adverse negativity and corruption taking place because of this, what should be a useful and remarkable tool.
I think I've seen a few examples recently as well of these tools making mistakes. I think I read one about, I think it was Afghan refugees were using an AI language translator, and actually the translator was getting things wrong. And that was affecting their appeals. And I think these tools are being released so quickly that, I don't think we can always be sure that they are reliable.
I think that's a really interesting point of language. I heard something at the Bet Show. I went to see a talk from a very clever chap from Oxford University, and even in that conversation, he spoke about its proficiency in different languages, which it's obviously very good at lots of languages, but it's better at English. So therefore, already is that ethically sound that if you speak the English language, you get a better experience with the technology than if you speak French or German. Now, that's again that digital divide question, and that is an ethical question as well. And again, it's something you need to consider. But the positives are there as well. For example, we've got some Ukrainian children at RGS Worcester, and some of their English. I mean, their English is exceptionally good, but it's still not technically as sound as a native English speaker. So when you're trying to teach something like binary, which it's tedious at the best of times, and you have to make these lessons interesting. Let alone trying to teach Ukrainian children about ones and zeros and how computers use them. However, using ChatGPT, we're able to literally generate the lesson in Ukrainian, and the girl who was learning came over, sat down, pinged in some questions, got some responses in Ukrainian, and was able to take part in the lesson. So there, in a nutshell, is that dichotomy of positivity, but at the same time, negativity. I think every single aspect of AI has two perspectives that could be used for good and potentially could be used for bad. And the ethics are really head scratching.
That idea about hallucinations and the bias as well is a really important element of it. And how can we then ensure pupils as well as staff are really considering that? Because I know I've seen lots of people talk about research articles, for example, where actually the quotes are fake or they're making up those bits. And if you challenge AI, it will come back and say, actually, yeah, I did make it up. So how do we do that, especially if you go back into the context of children using it and asking it to solve equations and it's coming back with something that isn't accurate? Because as you said earlier, it is a language model. It is being fed over 300 billion pieces of information, and at the moment it doesn't reason the way that humans reason. And I think that's one of the things that makes us unique, makes us as a species. But technology may get there. We can't say never because of what's happened in the last year. I don't think any of us could have foreseen how quickly it's grown. But yeah, going back to that idea of bias, what are some of those things that we need to consider or give tips to staff or pupils to make sure that we don't do that too much, John?
I think it's fascinating what you just said there, James, about the maths. If you said to us 3 or 4 years ago that there's going to be AI around the corner, what's it going to be good at? We'd all say, well, it'll be really cool at making really difficult calculations really quickly. Actually, it turns out it's amazing at making amazing pictures and writing poetry. It's kind of the opposite to what we all thought. It's not that good at mathematical complications, especially more complex ones. So I think we need to understand how it works. We spoke about this briefly before. That is because it's predictive. It's a predictive tool. It just guesses well enough to be useful, and therefore, when when it does make up quotes, we've got to be able to teach children to look at the quote and then use their research skills to find that quote. And when it turns out it doesn't exist, they know to disregard it. I remember friends at school, when I won't name them because they might get in trouble, who would, in exams, in sociology exams at university, just made up quotes. It's not put it in, and they passed there. They got a 2-1. So it's not. It's kind of is replicating human behaviour in a strange sort of way, because we do make stuff up as well. That is what creativity is. So it's a really interesting conversation, and as long as you understand that it's a guessing machine that guesses really, really well, and you can't take anything that it says at face value, you've got to cross-reference it. It becomes less of a threat and less of a untrustworthy source. It's just it is what it is, and you get out of it what you put into it to an extent, and you've got to be able to also just assume that it's got things wrong and you've got to check.
Yeah, and I think, as companies like Google start to build these sort of AI chatbots into their tools more, I think, we'll be able to relax about those kind of things a bit more. So, for example, there might be a chatbot that's trained on all of the maths course materials. So all the answers are actually going to be based on the academic content that you've fed to it, rather than just being this big, massive open data source that has things that are wrong as well as right.
I think it's a really good point. I think that's when it becomes better. It's when you give it the research papers. You don't ask it to give you its own thoughts and its own understanding. You say, the Chat PDF is a really good example of that. You feed it some research. The problem with Chat PDF at the moment is that you get, without paying for it, you only get 3 bits and bobs. And I don't think you can. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't put in 2 opposing research papers and ask it to compare them, can you? It's kind of one or the other, as far as I know.
Don't think so.
But that's around the corner, surely, where you've got something like Google Scholar, but an AI version. So it's not predicting things. It's actually using all the research that's ever taken place on everything to help you learn more about any given subject. And I think when that happens, it becomes more reliable and therefore more useful. But the question is about bias, and everyone's got bias. It's human nature to be biased about what cereal you like or what football team you support. So how you avoid that when the data that AI is trained on is coming ultimately from humans, how you get it to eliminate that, it's way beyond my pay grade, I'm afraid, James.
And I know I've seen Biden this week, and I know the UK government have met with various people in the field, and Biden said, "We're here to learn from you." And I think actually that is the key point. You need to get the right people around the room to have these discussions. And one of the points you were saying earlier about the workflow, it was almost about the workflow. When I know we're looking at digital transformation in our trust and our academy at the moment, and one of the misconceptions we're trying to get over is that you use technology for everything. No, you use it for where its strengths are. What are those strengths that you can do as a human, that human connection with the pupils, and understanding where you need to go with the curriculum and where those gaps are and what you need to do as a consequence of the data you've been given. But it's actually, where is technology great for that? How can we use it for the efficiency? How can we find those gaps? And in terms of tools like summarizing, or I know I watched something on Twitter earlier where someone can now dictate a task into their phone, use something online to then do a transcription of that. That can then go to their Notion database. It has the tasks, it links it to the articles, all to the projects he's got, all within like a minute or so processing it. And I was like, okay, that works brilliantly. And because the technology is there, reliable for that translation and transcription, it actually works really well. And so it's a really interesting of where we go with it. And I think I want to go back to, we've talked a lot about technology, we've talked a lot about bias. One thing that I think teachers would be scared of, and we'll come on to it in a bit, it's about that future of education. And there was a quote made that we experience more technological progress in the coming decade than we did in the preceding 100 years put together. Now, that was made 3 years ago, that prediction. And I think it's only now that we can really see actually, yeah, this whole idea of this Hollywood world is actually coming to life right in front of our eyes, and where it goes can be fascinating. But do you think then AI endangers and challenges this human interaction we have with children? And if so, what do you think are some of those considerations we need to make when implementing AI into school, or some of those things we need to think about? Faye, if you start that off.
Mhm. So I don't think anybody wants to lose that human connection. I don't think children want to. I don't think parents would. I don't think teachers do. I think AI has the potential to free up teachers' time and give them time to actually develop those in-person relationships better. It's interesting. I was having a chat with a student a couple of days ago about AI and assessment, and his feeling was very much that he would prefer an AI to mark his work. He feels like it would be free from bias, that it would be more accurate, that it would give more meaningful feedback. But he still very much valued those relationships with teachers. So I think if it can just take away some of that workload for teachers, that sort of busy work that at the beginning, John, you were talking about, saying stuff that we spend so much time on and it has actually very little value, then it can actually perhaps have the potential to make relationships between teachers and students more meaningful and more personal.
Totally. I think, again, if you go right back to the start of this whole conversation, when you asked us about our respective educational journeys, we both spoke about work experience, or the opportunity to work with children came along, and we thought, this is what I want to do. And that still is the biggest attraction of education. It's a chance to sort of help children progress and develop and shape their futures. And AI is a tool to help with that. You wouldn't, if AI was, if teachers were robots at the front of the classroom, education would be completely unrecognizable. And as Faye said, the relationships wouldn't be there. And ultimately, we want pupils to go into the working world and leave school and leave university as well-rounded global citizens. And there's no way that could happen without human interaction. And the tools that AI have for us to use help with the things that can be automated. The fact they can be automated says a lot, I think. And those robotic tasks that we all have to do, if they can be done by computers, it will give us more time to be more human.
Yeah, so in a lesson, maybe a student comes in and shows the teacher, all the AI feedback that they've been given, and then they have more of a coaching conversation about the student's progress and what their next steps might be.
I think that really brings it into fruition. A full circle there. I think we could go on for hours, talk about AI and how it could change, and we're coming no answers, but we're at least have a way forward of what we could do and some of those things. So I want to end with one question for both of you, which is, what is that one piece of advice you'd give someone starting out who wants to explore AI? Open up to the floor. Whoever wants to go first, brave enough.
It's a good question, and I'll try and answer it. One piece of advice I think I would give to someone starting AI is keep an open mind about it, and be prepared to be amazed, but also to remember that what you're experimenting with is literal digital evolution, and things change quickly. Well, that's probably about 10 bits of advice there, so I've completely defeated the point of the question. But keep an open mind. I'll try and summarize as quickly that, and be prepared for change.
Mine's kind of similar. I would say be curious but critical. Make sure you learn how the tools actually work and what their possibilities and limitations might be. And explore as many different tools as you can. I think, as we said, it takes so much time to learn all the different things out there. So, make use of people like Dan Fitzpatrick, who puts out so much content, has an amazing database online that he's updating every day with AI tools. Make use of people like that and sign up for his mailing list.
And if anyone wants to find out any more, definitely follow John and Faye on Twitter. And there are a lot of resources out there that we'll share. But kind of just to finish this off, I wanted to get kind of that question, what the future of AI, from a different perspective as well. And I asked Christopher Dither, who's a teacher, a tech supervisor, head of a makerspace. He's also Apple Professional Learning Specialist at Compass. And he works with teachers, supervisors, and principals kind of to talk about what are his thoughts about AI. I'm just going to close our show really playing this and listening to his summary of what he thinks AI will be.
How will AI transform our education? As we move further into the 21st century, the role of technology in education is increasing at an exponential rate, but also the way we think and reflect on technology and how to use it. One of the most significant developments in this area is the integration of AI in education. In this talk, my main focus will be AI in education and how it can impact the way we learn and teach. But why is AI relevant to discuss when talking education and transformation of educational systems? Firstly, pupils face AI every day when they exit schools. They will meet AI while using personal assistants like Siri, but also when they enter social medias, pupils meet AI algorithms with targeted ads. One of our main purposes with schools is to make pupils grow and prepare them for the society they will meet. We have to educate our pupils to navigate safely, but also in an exploring way in an ever-changing world. Due to this, I have found 5 areas where I expect we'll see some huge changes due to AI. The first area is how we work on generating ideas. One way I'm working with AI with my classes is how we develop an idea. AI can help my pupils to generate ideas for their multimedia projects. For example, AI-powered tools can help them do videos, images, or sound effects for their projects. This can help some of my pupils who are struggling to come up with ideas. And AI can also provide new perspective and inspiration for my pupils who are looking to expand their thinking. My second focus area will be on content creation. In teaching, it can be difficult at times to find the time to work with design loops where you repeatedly develop an idea, but also having the time to create larger pupil projects. I expect AI is going to transform this as well. With AI, pupils can easily create mock-up based on their ideas and wishes they are having for school assignments. The mock-up can give the pupils ideas for the product they are going to create themselves in teaching projects. AI can give pupils inspiration for multimedia content such as animations, videos, and music they can use in their own productions afterwards. My third focus area will be on personalized feedback. Currently, we are experiencing that teachers do not always have the time to provide personal and high-quality feedback to their pupils, even though they really want to do it. AI is going to transform the way teachers can give feedback. AI can be used to grade assignments so that the teachers can take the results and transform them into personalized feedback with future steps for the pupils. This way, the teacher does not have to grade assignments with clear answers, but can instead use that time to help the pupil progress in their education. My fourth focus area will be on creating exciting learning experiences. When creating lesson plans, the teachers spend a lot of time searching for materials, texts, and resources. This is the time that could be used to create creative and inspiring activities for the pupils. I believe that in the future, AI will be used to help teachers develop lesson plans and curriculum. Teachers can ask AI assistants to find texts, researches, or similar materials based on their goals and subject matter. This way, teachers can use their time on larger and more creative activities, which can be difficult to find the time for today. The fifth focus area will be on accessibility. In the future, AI will provide even better opportunities for equal access to education. Regardless of any physical or mental challenges your pupils are facing, resources are being developed to assist humans. For example, pupils with dyslexia will have a range of new tools to help them navigate in different tasks. Tools that predict words are becoming even better and better and providing students with better learning opportunities. AI tools with eye tracking while reading for the pupils will improve even better, allowing teachers to provide even better feedback. In general, AI can help us providing a school that fits for all our pupils.
That's a really good summary to close up of almost tonight's show, and those advantages of AI in education are manifold. It's really got a potential, only limited by our scope of our collective imaginations. But there are those ethical issues, concerns that cannot be ignored. We are living in the time of exponential growth. AI can generate ideas, it can create that content, personalized feedback, help our workload, create those exciting learning experiences, help with accessibility. But there are concerns about bias. And I think, as John and Faye said in today's show, go with it with an open mind, but be a critical thinker. Thank you for John and Faye, and thank you to listening to Teacher Talk Radio. I hope you introduced this introduction very much, because we could go on for hours on this. And thanks to Christopher as well for his audio there. If you want to listen back to Teacher Talk Radio, please download the Podbean app or visit your favourite podcast player and search Teacher Talk Radio. You can also go to ttradio.org and listen back and visit all of the shows that are coming up over the next week or so. Follow us on Twitter at TT Radio Official and tweet us using the hashtag TT Radio. Thank you for listening, and until next time, goodbye.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.